must leave here. He's far stronger than we ever could have imagined. Bastard called me deadweight, but he come all this way for nothing. Actually help. If Donte loses, you're all that can defeat yours.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report, dude.
It's been 9 years. 9 long years since this travesty came onto the world. Hi. Hello. This is DmC Devil May Cry. And what's this game's public reception currently?
What the hell is this?
Back to your regularly scheduled program. Also, sorry, movie's over.
Now, before you start typing up your comments, because I happen to know there are people who do bring up the definitive edition of the game as a defense of it. And yeah, I agree, it did fix quite a few issues, but that's not the game I was given when this mess came out. And it still doesn't fix a lot of the issues I have with this game's story. And you're gonna sit there and listen as we go down memory lane and talk about this trash fire of a game. Spoilers, by the way. Also, I shouldn't have to say it, but I will anyway. If you like the game, good for you. Make your own video expressing your opinions, cause these are mine. I'm MangaKamen, and let's begin!
The fires of hell hath no fury like mine.
The year is 2010. 2 years after Devil May Cry 4, and the Tokyo Game Show decided to showcase the newest trailer for the next installment. Dear God, this was 12 years ago. You know, in one of the articles I showed at the beginning of the video, the writer claimed that Donte from the original Devil May Cry was an anime edgelord, and that it was in line with the British punk edgelord that we got in this game, which, if you think this is as edgy as this, then I have to question what you think edgy actually is. And then they bring up Devil May Cry 2, as if that's actually a point in their favor to show that Donte has always been edgy in the past. And neglects that fans that hated that version too.
You don't want to be like this. This is disgusting. This is awful in every way.
If I could kill it, I would.
And the reason why when 3 and 4 came out, the developers went back to playful Donte. I don't even like the word edgy to be used as a critique, since, like everything on the internet, people have watered down the word to mean almost anything they don't like. But this trailer back in the day certainly did have what was considered to be edgy. And while yes, Devil May Cry did have its growing pains, most of the love for the series came from 1, 3, and 4, and how enthralling those games were, even though 4 was lambasted a little bit. Then you get this mess, which, can I say, looks ugly as all sin, and not in the good way. I'm not going to say that the previous games in the franchise were great masterpieces, but this trailer certainly didn't really appeal to the people. Gone was the fun-loving strawberry sundae eating badass, and you got this crackhead-looking smoker. It literally goes against DMC's thesis statement. You can be cool without smoking, swearing, or being a jackass. These are things that the original Devil May Cry director Hideki Kamiya stated himself in an interview.
When asked about the character designer to make visualized images of Donte, he gave 3 focus points for the designer. I gave stylishly run with a long coat, British guy, and doesn't smoke cigarettes. Long coat is just what I wanted to put on a showy character. And British guy, you know, I wanted for Donte to not only be a fighting man, witty, and traditional about his fighting, but also about cigarettes. This is simple. I just thought man without cigarettes is cool. Also blocked.
And what was done here? Well, regardless, what was the reasoning behind this drastic change? We actually got an interview that explains that reasoning.
What is your name?
In general, what we want to do is obviously do a reboot, which is a going back to the creation myth of Dante, as it were, and like a lot of meaningful templates that are currently in media, keep what was awesome and compelling about the canon, and then take a certain degree of artistic license with what we think needs to be updated and modernized. So that's the general ethic and point of departure that we started with once we settled on a reboot as the thrust of the game.
Oh god, I'm getting flashbacks to Dead Rising. This is also Capcom, isn't it? Anyway, this is something that was a bit of a trend in gaming, and part of the reason why I now have to raise an eyebrow at Western developers when they get their hands on Japanese properties nowadays. There's a bit of a stigma that Japanese games are dismissed because they have moments of wackiness or fan service. That these games are trash. I'll get more into this when we talk about the story of DmC, but I'm setting the groundwork right here. There were other things that really irked the fanbase with this game before it came out, such as GDC, where the developers decided to compare the original Donte to a gay cowboy. Now, obviously this was a joke, and I will admit fan backlash was something that did get out of hand, but it still antagonized the audience. I personally don't care at the time, mainly because, well, I had more important issues to deal with, but still, it wasn't a smart move to make. Now, Nina Christensen, the co-founder for Ninja Theory, said in an interview that the push for the new design to Donte came from Capcom themselves. Whether or not this is true, we'll never fully know. But this is also stated by Christian Sevzen, Capcom's VP of Strategic Planning and Business Development, that there need to be a new look for Donte. Again, this isn't full-on confirmation of this being true and the team was expecting backlash, but considering what we got in the final product, yeah, I still don't like this decision no matter who made it. It didn't help that the game journalists were being their usual jackass selves at the time too.
Anyone who played Devil May Cry 4 must surely have seen how desperately the IP needed an injection of new ideas and modernization, which is exactly what the skillful Ninja Theory achieved.
Oh yeah, let's dump on the older games. That's the best way to go about this! Look, when you make a big change to the series, such as taking a long staple of how a character looks and acts, you're gonna cause waves, positive and negative. It'd be like taking Mario, a fun-loving, chubby Italian plumber, and turning him into a muscle-bound tough guy you'd see in a fighting game. Unless you got parts of what made the initial charm of the character had latch onto your new version, you're going to get backlash. Hell, Muscular Mario could work if he still had his goofy moments. Donte does not have that in this game. He lacks the charm and grace that the original Donte had. There's nothing in the game that would lead me to believe that Donte returned to the fun-loving Donte. One more thing to note before we actually get into the game itself, it was the response that Ninja Theory got. As it turned out, Ninja Theory got some death threats from fans, in the forms of comics and death metal songs. What the fuck? As usual, I don't approve of those sorts of things. Death threats are not cash money in my book, especially with this topic. But people will always love to lump in the bad actors with everyone who had an issue with the game, and will boil it down the problems that people had with it and call them losers! Or that the only issue was the changes of Donte's hair. Shit-talking the fans and their complaints will only serve to rile them up even more and more, and while the fans shouldn't react this way, there's a reason why "don't poke the bear" exists as a phrase. DmC and Ninja Theory took a fair share of potshots at the original franchise, making heavy implications that they thought the series the fans grew up with was lame and uncool, and that the original Donte was lame and uncool as well. We live in a time where people are really protective of the media they consume. Even 10 years ago, this was a thing, and it's unfortunate that some people take it too far. But for what we got, I have to say, I'm not a fan of it.
So you must be the secret ingredient.
Whether or not you think Donte is better as a character than the original Donte, that's not the point of this video. I mean, it started off as when I began this script, and I still think that this decision was stupid, even more so with this, which makes no frickin' sense. Why would there be a white wig at a pure amusement park? Regardless, for this video I'm going to be upfront and concise for once in my life, as I consider the game to have an average if not lower script, with an engaging plot and characters whom are just as memorable as cardboard cutouts you find in your local movie theater. The story is basically a cliche of Hollywood movies, and unfortunately the games have been falling victim to politics. I've stated this before that I don't mind politics in games, and at the same time, I hate this phrase.
Wow. So you're like all political.
Everything is political, Sean.
Are you sure about that?
If you don't want to waste your time watching an 80-minute video where I explain my stance in a more nuanced, but to make it clear reason why I hate this phrase, my reason is because people shove politics into everything and will use that to project political motivations into everything. Not everything is an allegory for politics. Politics do not encompass all human experience, and if you're viewing everything through a political lens, then I have to say you must have a very stressful yet boring life. Politics are important, yes, but not everyone wants to be in a political mode all the time. And sometimes people just want to enjoy something, and politics in a game doesn't mean it can't be good.
Sugar bad for you.
When it's done right. Like, there's a difference between having a subtle message in your game, and then there's an in-your-face, look at us, we're being SMRT here, capitalism is evil! When the story is this blatant and not helped by the characters not being all that great, you don't have a compelling narrative. And just because you have a mature rating and mature message doesn't make your writing mature. Donte's story in this game is probably one of the most Donte's story in this game is probably one of the most cookie-cutter, anti-establishment messages I've seen in a game. Big corporations are bad, poisoning our lives, and people are too stupid to see it. Blah, blah, blah. This would have made a much better statement if this wasn't stuff we've seen before. I've stated that just because something has been done before, though, that doesn't mean it's bad. But the problem is that the game doesn't do anything new. Ninja Theory basically ripped off They Live's story and slapped on a poor Devil May Cry paint job. You know the story, the main character is a punk who has a lot of power to basically flip off modern society and just lives for himself, but eventually meets a couple of people who help him become less of a jackass, and he learns to care for the world. It's not like we haven't seen that before. Hell, you can even argue that Nero in DmC 4 and Donte in DmC 3 had similar character arcs. The developers were trying to make Donte and his world cool again. Remember, by Ninja Theory standards, Donte from the original games was lame. Here's the thing about OG Devil May Cry stories. They have their high moments, yes, but what made them so memorable was the cheesy lines. There's a certain charm to this cocky demon hunter. And what's Donte's clever one-liners? Obviously, I'm going for the most blatant example here, but let's look towards the interaction between Donte and Virgil.
You sure know how to throw a party. No food, no drinks, and the only babe just left.
And in this mess...
I'm stronger. I'm smarter. I'm better looking. And I got a bigger dick.
10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, 100 out of 100, best king, best king.
Fuck you! If you've had any sort of time in the DmC Phantom, you've already seen these scenes. You know that the writing isn't clever. It's probably some of the most try-hard BS. And it just lacks the charm that other Devil May Cry games had. That cheesy charm. People like watching the original Donte because they're so fun to watch and listen to. It's genuine. It also helps that it makes the character all the more memorable because his snark actually fits his character. However, when Donte tries to do something cool or say something cool, it's more mean-spirited and off-putting to the audience. It's not just because he's unlikable. Trust me, there are characters out there who are absolutely adored who have done much worse than Donte. The main issue that I'm supposed to like this character better than the original Donte, like, fuck no! There's a place for the more crass writing, but when it encompasses a majority of the writing of a story with the protagonist who's not really all that likable, then it's just a slog to sit through. Like, there's an attempt with supporting cast to increase the interest in the story, which apparently Ninja Theory was pushing a bit more with this. Gee, where have I heard that before?
What in the world?
But the characters barely add anything. No better example of this is Cat. You know, the cutout of a character whose character's traits are being kidnapped, abused, and jerking off squirrels? No, I'm not kidding about that last one. Yeah, she has a role in the story as someone to find Donte and open portals to Limbo, but there's nothing really to her character beyond that. She's bland. You know, now that I think about it, DmC Devil May Cry kinda hates its female characters. Let's see, you got a couple of prostitutes with Donte in the beginning, Ava was turned to a backstory and referred to as Ava the Whore, the dirty mouth succubus who was just a tool for Mundus, Mundus' living accessory of a, well...
The world is at last your bitch, as am I.
What?
Oh, very sneaky, Ninja Theory. You cut that part out of the HD version. How very convenient. I am surprised game journalists even liked this game in the first place with all this crap. You'd figure they'd call it sexist. But no, game journals seem to like it because it's the easiest game in the series. Every other entry is just glorified trash, apparently. God, what a depressing world we live in! Devil May Cry may not be the greatest story in gaming told, but at the very least the characters were fun and gameplay complemented that. Oh, and then there's Virgil. God, what did you do to my boy? Well, at least in the definitive version they got rid of the fedora. That's all Ninja Theory changed in the course of the characters and story, of course. God, I'm depressed right now. Now, when it comes to gameplay, that's a bit more complex than me saying it's garbage, because it ain't. Granted, I'll say initially the game had a lot of issues, and I'll bring them up here just to be fair, but know that a number of them were fixed with the definitive edition. I'm just bringing them up now because apparently the most common version is the Steam version, which is not the definitive version.
It's hideous, but beautiful in an ugly way, but mostly hideous.
Who am I kidding? Knowing how the internet works, you people aren't going to listen to this. So, probably one of the worst aspects of the game is initially being at 30 frames per second. When you're in a game that requires good timing, reaction, and action, that's not good. Especially when you consider that the previous games in the series ran twice at that. Thankfully, this was fixed in the definitive edition, like I already said. It still had the small minor effect of combat feeling a bit clunky at times, though. There wasn't an actual lock-on mechanic initially, and while you don't really need it, when you're dealing with large amounts of enemies, you'll find it hard to get specific enemies. I even experienced that when I was fighting the succubus, that when I wanted to attack her fingers, I actually go for the head, and it was a similar experience with the regular enemies too. Whether they're flying, or you attack them with the wrong colored weapons, the lack of lock-on made a bit of a chore. Oh yeah, that was also a thing! The color-coded enemies and AI, because if you didn't know, Donte gets weapons with different colors in addition to Rebellion, and if you didn't use the right color, well...
I'm fucking invincible!
The attack would be blocked, and it really messed with the flow of combat. This might have been a fun mechanic if it wasn't for the fact that enemies love to clump up with each other. Maybe this was a me thing, but I recall that happening for a long time. Not that it really mattered, the moment you got Devil Trigger going, all the enemies would be flown into the air, allowing you to pick off enemies one at a time, and it'd heal you quickly too. Really, while the mechanics could be frustrating, the game was actually pretty easy, and while I myself don't really care for that sort of thing, I can see it as being a good introduction to hack and slashers, but that's not really appealing, especially when you get to the harder difficulties initially. At least as a decent fan of Devil May Cry, especially since it was super easy to rack up the higher ranking, I mean, instead of getting flashy combos, all you had to do was button mash and there you go. Part of the fun and such for me in the past DMC games was finding and working out combos. That was thrilling, and DMC just pushed the delete button on that to me. Oh, and the bosses. Oh, the bosses. They're not bad, they're just unmemorable to me. Did you know there was a boss fight against Mundus? At least I think there was. My brain may be broken. I can't remember anything about it. Only boss fights I consider good was Virgil, which was like Virgil from DMC 3 but not as good, and Bob Barbas, who just literally was a talking head and pretty much the only good political commentary that was actually making me laugh.
Who's asking for a Labor Day rundown in my ear?
Again, a few of these issues were fixed in the definitive edition, but considering that it took a while to fix these issues, I'm sad that those who don't have a glorified box of plastic will have to rely on the digital version of the game on Steam. and these are probably still an issue in it. Thank God for modders. And don't get me wrong, the game is more accessible after the hardcore entries in DMC. Save for 2, but that game does not exist.
Well, that was a load of shit.
I do not like DmC Devil May Cry. This opinion, however, is nothing new. When the game came out initially all those 9 years ago, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who wasn't a game journalist shill who loved to piss off the fans even more so than necessary. I will say, aside from my thoughts on the story and characters, the vitriol for this title that I held in my heart has quelled quite a bit. I won't say I'm a fan of it, but I tolerate it, because for 6 long years, there was nothing for the Devil May Cry franchise, and this would have been the end of the series, much like how Dead Rising got the same treatment. So, I tolerated DmC Devil May Cry. Or I did until Devil May Cry 5 came out. Yeah! And hey, DmC 5 made fun of the past of DmC Devil May Cry, even actually adopting the announced ranking mechanic that wasn't in prior games. That to me is what a mature game is all about. There's a difference between Donte and DmC 5's Donte, because Donte's game actively comes off as ashamed of the legacy that Devil May Cry had. That's why it's a reboot. That's why they burned everything to the ground to create a PR nightmare. Devil May Cry 5, on the other hand, embraces its past. Even Donte's game to an extent. Even the cowboy hat is obviously a wink to Ninja Theory's really stupid presentation. Whether or not this whole mess is Capcom's or Ninja Theory's fault is not really the issue here. To me, this game came off as someone who didn't like Devil May Cry's series, whether it be some Capcom executive like Mighty No. 9's Keiji Inafune, or if it's Ninja Theory's actual fault and they're just passing the buck. They certainly didn't respect the legacy that Devil May Cry had. Embracing your past, laughing at yourself, and even if you moved on, you acknowledge the good and bad times. That, my friends, is maturity. Donte's game comes off as an angsty teenager who's trying to act mature and aloof, but at the same time, is still, at the end of the day, a jackass. And there was a time that people were upset that we may never see the original cast of DmC, because despite what normies on the internet like to tell you, these are beloved characters. Characters that people love to watch and play as. And the legacy of Devil May Cry would have ended with this. So, while you may like DmC Devil May Cry, please try to at least understand that some people had legitimate reasons to dislike this change to the gameplay, the characters, and overall disrespect to what was being done to a beloved gaming franchise to a large number of people. I will say one thing. I do like Donte, el exterminador de demonios. Don't know what to tell you. With the accent and music choice, this scene works a lot better. God, I am going to YouTube hell for this, aren't I?